So folks, this is our History Calling, Where Will It Take You webinar that we do on the third Thursday of every month. And as we're starting a new semester, we wanted to bring a big gun in. And so, so we've invited Dean Rehberger. Dr. Rehberger is the director of the Matrix and faculty at Michigan State University. Dean specializes in developing digital technologies for research and for teaching. He's run numerous faculty technology and workshops and given presentations for educators and cultural heritage workers from local, national, and international audiences. Now, Dean teaches a variety of courses at MSU for history and museum studies. He also helps to design and develop online courses for history. Dean oversees the Matrix project planning, research and development, coordinating many of the grant-funded projects for the center. And his research includes semantic web and big data, digital history, humanities, and social sciences, digital libraries, museums, archives, and digital technologies in the classroom. So this is going to be really interesting and informative today. I'm really grateful, Dean, to you for agreeing to come and visit with us today for a little bit. And so with that, Dean, welcome. And yes,
here.
So starting off, I mean, I kind of read a little bit of a biography of you, but could you give us a little personal biographical sketch and tell us a little bit more of who you are and what you do?
Sure, be happy to. So I started out a long time ago at the University of Michigan, and I did a degree in philosophy. And then when I ended up driving a truck, I thought it'd be good to go back to school and do something else. So I was at the University of Wisconsin, and I happened to have a very lucky break of moving with a professor up to the University of Utah, where I did my graduate work with a fabulous faculty in history there. So from there, I went to Michigan State University, and I tend to tell people that my career is designed around stumbling. That I tend to stumble into things, which I think it is probably the best bet for any historian, because as historians, we always like to look into the past, but we have to go without preconceived notions of what we're going to find. That's what I did. I kind of went into my career not really having a clear sense of what I was going to do, because I was in what's called American Studies, which looks at American culture broadly. I was always really interested in computers. So when I got to Michigan State University, I started working with a digital humanities center called Matrix. The rest is kind of history. We've done lots of very large scale projects, starting back at the turn of the century with the National Gallery of the Spoken Word, where we worked on putting sound online. I don't think many of you remember, but back in the days when putting 15 minutes of sound was a really, really big file to put online and make accessible to people. And of course, nowadays you can just stream just about anything you want in terms of media. But that's what we do. We work on lots of large-scale archival and digital projects to really preserve the cultural heritage. Particularly, we're really interested in cultural heritage objects. How's that sound?
I think that's a great introduction. Thank you. You have a great reach, and I think it's interesting for us to realize that you can have an interest like American studies, and it broadens out to these other great interests and accomplishments that you've been able to do. So, can you kind of tell us maybe about what your work environment is like? What's it like there in your office and
That's a fantastic question. Well, lately it's been really interesting since we've all been kind of working online digitally. But in an interesting ways, it hasn't changed. What I love about my job is that, unlike a lot of historians are kind of strange people. I hope I don't offend any historians. The people I like to offend are usually the people who do quilts. And I can't have people raise their hands if you've actually been a quilter, but there's always lots of quilters in any given audience. And I'll tell you why I offend them later. But as historians, we often like to go off to archives and work alone, and then come back and write our great tome and publish it, and then get accolades for that, and such. The wonderful thing about digital humanities and working on digital projects is we're always working in larger groups, that any one digital project needs lots of different people. You need the project manager, you need the web designer, you need the library and archive specialist, you need content specialists, who can bring the information to you. You're often working with archives. I've had a great career where I've worked with the Smithsonian museums over the years, which is wonderful, but I've also worked with museums around the world. So that's the great part about my workspace, is not only is it a kind of a collaborative workspace where we get to work with lots of different people on any given day, but I get to travel around the world and meet and work with people. So my workspace is kind of global.
That's that is kind of unique, isn't it? From the situation of working just on your own and then compiling your research. So that's Dean, could you give us maybe a little bit better understanding of what digital history is and the digital pieces that you're doing? What does that really mean?
Excellent question. It's a really bad question for you to ask, because people often have spent years defining what are digital humanities, and how do we define that? Who's a digital humanist and who's not a digital humanist? And my answer is we're all digital humanists now. We all use computers. We all use research techniques based on trying to find things. The wonderful thing is, when I was at the University of Utah doing my research work, it took me about 6 months in the archives, to find the materials I needed. And that was just to find the initial materials. I recreated that the other day in one afternoon, right, using the contemporary search tool. So, that's really one of the things that we're trying to focus on is how can we get historians to use those tools that are already available in much more effective ways. I see the big problem of the coming century as not when I was coming up in the field, there was a scarcity data. You'd have to spend months and months in the archive to come up with a little stuff. Now people are inundated with information. There's too much information. I often said if I were to come back, I work with a colleague who does prehistoric Egypt, and he just has a few rocks to look at. So, when you do American history, right, especially 20th century American history, you can have hundreds of thousands of hours of video, hundreds of thousands of audio, and millions of documents. How do you make sense of all that as a historian? And that's what we like to do. So that's kind of one answer to that question. The other answer to the question, again, goes back to what I was talking about in stumbling. The wonderful thing about being American studies is we like to kind of call ourselves dilettantes at everything and experts at nothing, which is the wonderful part of my career, because if you look just at the kinds of projects that Matrix does, we do everything from working on Great Depression recipes to quilts, to Malian photography, to slavery, to genealogy. We do all kinds of different things, and I get to do it all. I get to move between those different projects and see how is the data being used, how could it be more effective, how could it be more efficient, what are different ways that we could do these things. So that's the other half of the more personal half of the question is, we're drowning in all this material. How can we do better? And of course, my life is wonderful because I get to go out and swim in all the material and figure out what to do with it.
Oh, that's amazing. And to realize how much stuff is out there and the problem of being able to access it and make it available. Great, good answer. So, Dean, tell us what current projects are you working on? What's coming up?
Well, that's again a great question. So, one of my favorite projects that I can't do the shoulders here. Over this shoulder is we just completed a little bit ago what's called What America Ate, and we're actually going to do another installment of this. And this was a wonderful project of bringing together all the materials during the Great Depression, most of you know that the WPA went out and sent out artists to do all kinds of things, like collect slave narratives and collect kind of folklore and things like that. One thing that people don't realize is that WPA went out across the country during the Great Depression and collected recipes and cookbooks from the average American. And one of the things that happened when World War II started, it just went to the winds. It wasn't collected in one place. Matter of fact, there was a big collection out in Montana. There was a big collection in DC and in several other places. And we brought it together in one place so people could access it online, What America Ate. And it's just a wonderful kind of snapshot of what life was like. If you want to find out what life is like in any place and at any time, look at what people eat, right? So we got great recipes on, everything from roadkill to my favorite, which most of you guys, I mean, usually when I talk to people, they don't understand this, but is the Montana turkey. Again, this webinar, you can't ask. Do you know what, Arnie, you know what a Montana turkey is?
I have no idea. I would guess something that would be probably totally off the wall, but tell us.
A jackrabbit. Right. You got a great, but they call it the Montana turkey. So we have all these wonderful recipes, but they're kind of contextualized and you not only collect the recipes, but people kind of explain their lives and what things were like during the Great Depression. Another great project that we have ongoing, we've had seven different grants for it, is the Quilt Index. We have over 100,000 quilts from 40 different historical associations collected in one place. It's a great place for research, and it's one of the main artistic routes for women, primarily, especially before this century. And so it's wonderful that places like the NEH would support this, bringing this all together. And I say, and I like to make fun of quilters because while we think of quilting as an art of bringing together fabrics, they're actually very technical people. And every single quilt actually has 300 fields. That's why I call them kind of crazy people. 300 different fields describing the individual quilts of how they're put together. And again, it's a wonderful thing, not only about the quilt and the fabrics, but they're part of family history, part of family lore. Another project is that I have over here, the Malian Photography Project, which in Mali became one of the centers for black and white photography, and it has excellent work. So we again there's over 100,000 images that we brought together from artists in Mali. And one of the things that is a favorite part of my work is we do a lot of work in West Africa and South Africa. So I spent a lot of time there. Again, one of the perks of doing this work over just being an Americanist is you get to do that. So this is a wonderful project that we did. And what's really cool is it's great for using in school because we got pictures of the 1950s and people bebopping and with their record players and their fab clothes out doing things, and it's great for students in America because they look at it and go, wow, my traditional stereotypes of Africa are really wrong, and so it's one of these great resources. And finally, we've actually been working with BYU and Family Search on this project. Is a project we called enslaved.org, which is looking to collect together in one hub all the information and data we can on people who were enslaved or part of the slave trade, which includes primarily those enslaved, but we also include slave owners and such. But the idea here is the really critical, at people who do genealogy, particularly for African Americans, getting past the 1870 census, getting behind that brick wall, as they call it, is very difficult. On the other hand, one of the sad tragedies of slavery is there are lots of records out there, but they tend to be records of property, probate records, insurance records, all kinds of things like that. And if we can bring those together, like many people who do genealogical work, if you take all those little threads and pieces of paper and stick them together, you can start recreating lives. And it's really important, central to this is recovering the people and recovering and being able to say their names is really central to this whole project. So that's one of our more recent projects. And then I'll finish up. I know you didn't want this long disquisition.
We love it.
But we have well, we have a number of projects in the hopper, but one of my favorite projects that we're working on right now in West and North Africa is called Memories of the Hajj. The Hajj is an annual pilgrimage to Mecca in Islam. And it's a wonderful project because when you look at religious rituals like that, you get a much deeper sense of the complexity and differences of religion, right? In the United States, when we think of Christianity, well, you know, there's everything, right? You know, from your Catholics to your snake handlers to your, your who, all kinds of differences. But when people tend, again, the stereotypes, and we think of Islam, we get very, very stereotypical views where once you start looking, especially at Africa, great variety, great differences, and often it shows in central events like pilgrimages. And also, of course, as a historian, they're wonderful events that even tell you about pandemics and things like that, because when you have lots of people making movements annually, it does create kind of health crises and different kinds of issues that come up. So that's a huge project that we're in 4 different countries: Morocco, Senegal, Mali, and the Ivory Coast, to bring together those materials as a seed project to get even bigger materials.
Well,
So that's why I say I'm lucky. I get to do all kinds of different, as a historian, I don't have to just focus on one thing for my whole career. I get to do all kinds of different things.
and so as on a personal level, this is very satisfying for you.
Oh yeah, I mean, the best part of my job is I get to help other people be better, and that's what I focus on. It's not so much about my career, because it is all collaborative work. Is how can we make things that can help others. One of our most popular and enduring projects that we have since the turn of the century is called Overcoming Apartheid, which is the fight and struggle against apartheid in South Africa, the separation of peoples based on race, and the long struggle against that, which had a strong component in the United States. And we did lots of oral history interviews because those people who struggled against it, like our World War II generation, are dying out. And it gets incredible use around the world. People use it. One of the most used, the people who use it the most are actually people from South Africa, which is really satisfying that, you created something that, it's not just going to go on a shelf somewhere and with all the other tomes that remain unread, but it's used regularly.
Yeah, being able to produce something that's indexed and, I mean, used all the time. I think that's very satisfying. You've mentioned these projects that you're involved in. Is there, what has been the most exciting for you, really? And what have you run across that's been unusual or interesting, and maybe a little bit odd that you've been able to find?
Well, all of our projects have always interesting and wonderful. Again, I think it's a wonderful thing about being a historian. Nobody ever talks about how fun it, often, people talk about the drudge work of going to archives and things like that. But being a historian is really fun because you get to go out and discover things. And every time we turn over something, we find something really interesting. There's 2 things that I'll mention real quickly that come to mind when you say odd and exciting. So we did this wonderful project where we preserved American Black Voices, which is a regular interview show that happened every week from Detroit Public Television from the 1960s on. And it has every major Black leader who came through Detroit. So it's this wonderful resource, again, used in schools across the country, even as in the new museum in Washington, D.C. on African American history. So, but in doing that, we were going through and we were digitizing all the material, and we found this wonderful segment where the producer and one of the other people set up a Gumby war. where it was never shown, but they had all these Gumby characters fighting these other Gumby characters. It just happened to be, again, would be on the cutting room floor in all these materials that we digitized. The other project, when people say what's weird and interesting, is we worked with this one scholar who did images of tumors, historical images of tumors, particularly by a Chinese artist, a Lamqua. In one ways, it's really intriguing, but in another way, it's really horrifying because it's all these historical images of before modern medicine, when, in a sense, tumors would grow out of control. And so, in one sense, it was a weird and strange and kind of thing that I wouldn't do. But what's, again, it's that notion, it's kind of like the quilt index. When we look at who actually uses it, and where, who are the users, who are the viewers. One interesting thing that came up the quilt index is one major users are military bases around the world. Why? Maybe it's a sense of home, maybe it's a sense of craft and something they can do, who knows? But one of the interesting things here with this, we put this up as kind of a historical index for other medical historians, but it's used in medical schools. Because it is a picture of what happens, to tumors that don't. So it's something that, most medical schools wouldn't have access to. So it not only do I get to kind of do weird and interesting things sometimes, but the most interesting thing about working in the online world is to find out who actually uses this stuff. It's obviously our focused audience is other historians, but then there's always other people that come and use things.
Well, that's very interesting. Something that you probably wouldn't think of.
Right.
So, turning this back to students, maybe, what skills are necessary for students to have developed to be able to do this kind of research?
That's an excellent question. Because we usually have anywhere from 20 to 30 students working with us at any one time. And there's no single set. I mean, as I tell students, I think what's important for a historian is important for our work. One is you have to care about what you're doing, and there's a certain sense of you have to be detail oriented. But I think you have to have a sense of curiosity. Most people would come to us and say, "Boy, I need to, I don't think I could work for you because I don't really have the digital skills." And most of the work we do doesn't require the digital skills. It requires all that work that surrounds the digital materials. Digitizing something is easy. Describing it, what is that? Who's in the picture? What's going on? The historical work, that's the expensive and hard part. So we have everything from hardcore programmers from computer science working for us to students from history, communications, all over the map, who work with us on a yearly basis, both on the undergraduate and graduate level. And some stay and never leave.
Well, that's good. They have a good history in the job. So, you touched on this a little bit, master's degrees, PhDs, things like that. What levels of expertise are really kind of needed for different projects that you have?
That's a really good question. We do have working for us full time people who have bachelor degrees to people who have PhDs. So, in terms of degrees, we have people with bachelor degrees who mainly run projects, project management, which in and of itself is one of the most difficult of all projects, but are great for historians because it's one of those things where you have to see how all these moving parts come together and keep it rolling down the hill, which is easier said than done. We really have all kinds of different levels. As I was talking about, our head of our digital lab actually came to us as an undergraduate student and kept working with us and gained a lot of skills about how to digitize all kinds of different materials and things like that. Then he kept working with us after he graduated. And while he was working with us, the wonderful thing about if you work at a university, you can go off and do school for much less. So he went off and got an MA at the same time. So it's again, it's really strange in the sense of people always come to me and talk about digital humanities and doing the digital work, that somehow the central skill is I need to know about technology. Well, that's helpful. It's good. You want to know about technology, but technology is, in a sense, the simple part for us. The hard part is the content.
Mhm. Very interesting. So, Dean, what else would be helpful, I guess, for these students to know about you, what you do, and how you got there?
Well, you know, in ways, you know, uh, I think my answer is twofold, because in a sense, I did both. Um, you know, there's the traditional route. You can go in and you know, as I said, I found going to school and staying in school forever was a really good thing. Just keep going. They give you degrees, and then you know, get a job and you keep going on. That's great. And so that's one route, right? You can just go on to be a professor. The other route, which I found in ways more satisfying, is working with historical institutions and museums and historical spaces, because you really get out, and I love public history, where you get to go out and touch and talk to people and get to how they understand. You know, so I think that's a really a good route in terms of kind of moving forward, is to think about all those public spaces where historians are needed. And of course, nowadays, you know, I would make the argument that, you know, there's a wonderful meme out there. It's, you know, the bad part about history is you have to watch everyone repeating the same mistakes over and over again, you know. And I think, you know, the more historians we have, the better in terms of understanding that, you know, the past in order to move into the future. So, you know, I think there's all kinds of different ways into the work we do.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. We're going to go into a Q&A here in a few minutes, but you know, I would, are there, what are we not asking that would be really important and engaging for our students to know?
Well, you know, I don't think there's anything you haven't asked. And in a sense, I've been stressing it all along. I think, you know, if I were to say what's the best part of my job, and what's really great is the amount of travel I get to do. Well, I used to be able to do. Just as the horrible part was just the day that they closed down the university and said we couldn't travel, we were on our way to the airport to go to Dakar and Senegal for a conference. But you know, I think the wonderful thing about what I do is to be able to go out and touch the lives of so many people around the world. And we worked in Australia, in Japan, and you know, all over Europe, and all over Africa. So you know, to really reach out and see different cultures and what's happening, of course, is one of the best ways. Not you know, historians have a kind of wonderful perspective by looking into the past, but as most of you know who've done traveling, you get to understand sometimes, again, our own mistakes by not seeing the world in a much more complex way.
Yeah, very, very interesting. We spoke to Allison prior to starting, and you know, she's our internship coordinator for history. What kind of internships do you see are could be valuable to put people into the type of situations that you're in now?
Well, you know, we do all kinds of internships, and of course, I like to make sure that they're always paid internships with students. You know, as I said, most of a lot of the work that we get done is through students, and a lot of the student work that we get is through internships. You know, we have a regular program each year. You know, as I said, even though I hate BYU. Oh, did I say that publicly? I'm sorry. You know, is that the University of Utah? I can't help it. when you're at Michigan State, of course, we have the University of Michigan down the road, and we're supposed to hate them, but actually we have a great relationship with them because they have an information school, and we get a number of interns from their school every year because again, information school is one thing I haven't talked about, but I think that's another avenue if historians are thinking about graduate school. Because information is one of the key industries of our new age, and and I know a number of people who've gone to information school. It's not just about libraries; it's about getting jobs at Google. It's about getting jobs at major places for lots of money that's out there. And again, I think at the heart of what I'm trying to emphasize with internships and everything else is when you think of the technical, remember that the technical needs the content. So all of these industries, everyone often thinks I can't go out and work for Google. I can't go off and work for Apple. I can't go off and because I'm a historian. That's not true. They need people like that who can understand what the technology is doing in the guise of the humanities. So it's really important.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for this. Allison, why don't we get some questions? I mean, Lindsay, I see your picture popped up.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering if you could talk to us about mentorship and what mentorship has looked like for you along your journey, and any recommendations you have for our undergraduate students that are seeking informal and formal mentorship.
Oh, I think that's really an excellent question. And I think it's one of the things that we don't talk enough about, that, I was lucky. Again, one of the wonderful parts of being in a career where you just stumble around is the reason I could keep stumbling upwards is because I had great mentors along the way, right? If you don't have those people who, in a sense, will help you out and make sure that they pick you up and dust you off and push you on to the next place. So for my career, it's been absolutely central. And of course, here, because of what I was talking about, we're often bringing people in who have one skill set, who then have to merge with other skill sets. It's really important to have mentorship. It's really important to, always being able to have people that people are working for us can say, I can go to them and I can get the questions answered. So, I think the short answer is absolutely, it's essential, and it's something that we practice here, and it's something that I don't acknowledge enough in my own career, that I was helped along the way.
Great, thank you. And a follow-up question, and this has to.
I should say, if we have any students out there listening, if I were to say anything about mentorship, is often I see great students who don't get the mentorship they need because they don't step forward and say, I want to work with you. Because you won't believe how many professors, oh great, you want to work with me? I got a job for you. So often if you could just step forward and say, worst comes to worst, but they'll say no. But if you don't ask, you can't find out. Anyways, go ahead.
It's so funny. That was my next question. I actually end up working with a lot of very introverted students who are worried that if they approach their professors without something profound to say, or without something that they are hoping to research, they won't do it at all. And so my follow-up question is, along with the mentorship, which I feel is a good guide into a career and into grad studies and into whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish, can you talk to us a little bit about the value of networking as well, and what you've done? Does it come through mentorship? Did it come different ways in order for you to get the role that you have now?
Oh, absolutely. And it's an excellent question, because I'm currently on a grant right now working with a bunch of people who do network theory. But yeah, and I was at a wonderful meeting out at the National Science Foundation where a woman was, she actually showed, here's the network of people that I had in my career. And it's something that I think we all should kind of sit down and kind of map out, both family and professionally, what's that network that you had. because I absolutely think that that's critical. I couldn't do what I do without having a network of relationships professionally, because one of the things that we're called a soft money center, and a soft money center basically means that we don't have any money. But obviously we could do, we've gotten $30 million in grants over the years because we've developed a network of relationships with other people. Because I can't go out and get those myself. I need to have the other people who have the sterling, reputations. I have to know the people in the different funding agencies and all those things. So without network, we couldn't exist.
Do you feel like this is kind of the trajectory for a lot of historians doing this kind of work, is that you run into funding issues? Is this common across the industry? Is this something that's just, depending on the school or whatever? Do you find that this is a skill that people need to have, that relational development and emotional intelligence to have those relationships?
I think the answer is that's an excellent question, and it's really complex. Because again, in a sense, I'm a non-traditional historian, right? I'm stepping into this space doing weird and strange things that historians don't normally do. As I began, most historians go out there and, in a sense, work on their own and do their own thing. And I think that's going to continue, and that's absolutely essential for being good historians, is to do that kind of hard digging and hard work on their own. But I also think we're at a turning point where more collaboration is needed, and we're going to do different kinds of forms of media of doing these things, and you can't do those forms without having partnerships and relations and networks. And of course, one of the things that I always taught on the side, which I love to teach, is grant writing. And I think it's absolutely, every historian should take a grant writing course because it's a great thing to, especially if you're not going to go and be a professor somewhere. If you're going to work for an NGO, or you're going to work for an archive or a library, you're going to go on to something, having that ability to write grants and get funding is key, and not natural for humanists, right? If you go across the way at BYU, you have those STEM people who live and die by, right? Humanists don't always do that.
Thank you for that. Okay, students, you heard it from the mouths of several witnesses. Competencies, competencies, competencies. Okay, thank you.
Dean, you brought up the subject of grants, and I think that's a very interesting topic. That where do these grants come from? I mean, we know that there are probably government grants that come, but are there other sources? And how would one find people that are willing to grant money for these kinds of projects?
Well, that's again an excellent question. Over my career, I've worked with 26 different funders. I started working, when I started work here, we were working primarily with the U.S. Foreign Services, because we were doing work in West Africa. Over time, we worked with everything from the major federal funders like NEH and NEA and IMLS, Institute for Museum and Library Services, on down the line. So and again, this is one of those things where people don't often realize is they have a whole cadre of people, great people that actually are waiting for you to call them and talk to them, right? Because as one program officer said, their job is to make sure they get the best possible proposals. So they want to talk to you about what you're doing and how you're doing things. But I've also been lucky, and I've worked with Ford Foundation and Lilly and a number of Mellon Foundation, which is funding our Enslaved project. is absolutely central. And again, it's a matter of just, taking that step, making the application. And this is the key. And I always tell people this because I've run into so many historians. Be prepared for rejection, right? Our best grant, the Quilt Index, was rejected 3 times and wasn't funded till the 4th time. So, you have to be prepared for that because that's always going to happen. And most people, they send out a grant proposal. Oh, it got rejected. I can't, I'm done. And that's not true.
It's pretty amazing. It's encouraging that there are foundations that can supply grant resources for this and are willing to do that.
Oh yeah, it's just just a matter of looking and working and trying and it's like everything else. I mean, you have to have a thick skin of getting rejected a lot and keep going back and trying other things and once in a while something works, and that's what has to happen.
Great. Lindsay, do we have some questions from our group?
It feels as if we've covered all the topics of interest today. We do not have any questions, so you must have done a very great job.
Been really good.
It was very boring.
I've been, I've had some questions. I've just been checking them off as we go because you've answered them. So, well, with that, then, if there are no questions from our students that are here, Dean, we want to thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Being here with us. And
I was mostly happy to be here.
just that one minor little thing.
It's a one minor thing, but I guess I can overlook that.
We appreciate you taking the time with us, and your knowledge is incredible, and it's got us excited about looking into these projects, and we would like to reach out to you.
Well, I'm glad. As I said, we've worked with folks at BYU over the years, and it's a wonderful place, and it's a great resource and amazing things going on there. So happy to talk to you guys.